Hi, welcome back to Sisterhood and Surgery for the October show. Today we are actually talking about something that's very relevant for all of us, not in just medicine, but in all specialties across the board, business, health, everything. Contract negotiations and the gender pay gap. We have two wonderful guests today, and of course, my wonderful co-host, Dr. Palma Shaw, who has been jet-setting all September and October. And remember, this is a live show, so if you have any questions, you can join by web. Go to pollev.com, go to DeBakey, and send us your question, or by text DeBakey to 37607, and we'll get your questions answered live on the show. Palma, do you want to start with introductions?
Sure, absolutely. It's really great to be here. This is a very important topic. Everyone take notes. We're going to get some good learning here from our experts who've been there and done that and have a lot to tell us. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Tahlia Weis, who's a graduate of the University of Washington School of Medicine and a public health graduate as well. He finished medical school and had a traditional PhD in chemistry from Purdue University. He was the first integrated vascular graduate from Medical University of South Carolina, where I did my internship not that long ago. And following graduation, she began working as a hospital-employed vascular surgeon in a rural health system called the Marshfield Clinic in north central Wisconsin. While establishing a robust and diverse vascular practice, she also advanced in leadership roles from the medical director of an ICVL to surgical services medical director, and now a cardiovascular service line medical director for the healthcare system. She's responsible for over 100 direct reports and continually works to operationalize cost-effective, evidence-based healthcare. She has maintained interest and engagement in financial education and awareness, developing and delivering a financial lecture series for residents in training, and offering national coaching and lectures on contract negotiation. She received her advanced certificate in feminist coaching in 2023 and continues to advocate for gender equity in pay and performance. And when not operating or administrating, she owns and operates multiple rental properties, and she identifies as a single mom to her intern baby, now 11 years old, a proud geriatric parent to her 4 and 10-month-old, and partner to her husband. Welcome, Tahlia. It's a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. Thank you, Linda.
And our second guest has already been on our show prior, maybe 4 years ago. That's how long we've been doing this webcast. It's Dr. Avianne Bunnell from St. Petersburg, Florida. And thank you again. We appreciate your time because you were in a very badly hit place from both hurricanes. So we truly appreciate all the effort you've put in to be here today. She's a highly accomplished vascular surgeon with a comprehensive background. She's currently serving as CEO and medical director of Pinellas Vascular LLC in St. Petersburg, Florida. She was a chief resident at the Medical University of South Carolina, how the world is so small, where she completed her specialty training in vascular surgery integrated residency program. She earned her MD from the University of Central Florida College of Medicine, where she was recognized with prestigious honors such as the Alpha Omega Alpha and the Order of Pegasus. She completed her undergraduate studies at the University of Arizona, graduating magna cum laude with a Bachelor of Science in Physiology. She's made substantial contributions to the International Society of Women Vascular Surgeons and serves on the steering committee for the Society of Vascular Surgery's Women's Section, as well as other variety of other society commitments. She has been an invited lecturer both regionally and nationally. Welcome back, and thank you for giving your expertise in another topic.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, and I'm just glad I have electricity and internet.
Having survived both Katrina and Harvey, I mean, you truly appreciate electricity after those times. So, this is a very important topic, especially in light of the newer research that's been coming out. We've always been taught, women are not getting paid equally because we don't ask. But however, new research from Vanderbilt, Professor Jessica Kennedy, found that now it's actually reversed, that we do ask, and we do try to negotiate, and that we are still having this gender pay gap. So unfortunately, she says negotiating well isn't enough to close the gender pay gap, and it's not the source of the problem. The women who negotiate on their behalf do risk a backlash effect, unfortunately. And participants who viewed women who negotiated for a higher compensation, higher salary, as less nice than women who didn't ask for more and were less willing to work with the women who did negotiate. It was not the same for male negotiators who faced no such backlash for negotiating salary. And so this backlash effects contributes to the persistent gender pay gap. Right now, it is about, we earn about 84% of what men earned in 2020. And of course, as you know, it starts early, and so this is compounded over lifetimes. And for physicians, women, if you look at the overall lifetime compensation, we make $2 million less than men. Think about that, $2 million. That could buy you a pretty nice mansion in Texas, and that is what we are not receiving, although we definitely deserve it. And so today we'll kind of look further into why that is. And, you know, I was negative Nancy. I'm like, well, I mean, you don't negotiate, you don't get it. You negotiate, you don't get it. I mean, like, what are you supposed to do? So we have some experts here to give us some advice and some data, and I'm excited to hear about it.
You should definitely negotiate.
Yes. Okay. Yes, we decided that.
So we're going to hone in on that now with each of our experts here who'll talk about first your background or experience with contract negotiation. And interestingly, you came out of the same program. So it'll be interesting to see where you, from that common point, where you got your experience. Tahlia, would you want to start?
Yeah, so it is a small world because I'm the first integrated graduate from Medical University of South Carolina. Abby is the third. So we definitely had overlap. I was part of the recruitment process for Abby to our program. But we've always been really transparent about discussions about finances. I think very specifically between Abby and I, but also in our program, I think. So, you know, from my perspective, you know, as a single mom during residency, I had to make a certain amount of money, right, in order to plan my destination, like plan the rest of my life. So I actually had a spreadsheet that was lent to me by one of our IR fellows, and it allowed me to budget, but then also determine if my starting salary was this much, right? What did that mean in my lifetime projection? And I remember, Abby, we shared that Excel spreadsheet. I think it was probably when you were a second or third year. And it, you know, it was a budgeting thing, but it showed you with conservative growth of, you know, 3 to 6% in your savings, you know, what that meant over your lifetime. And I think really just seeing it on paper or in Excel puts life to it, right? So these are all things that we discuss amongst ourselves. But I also remember as a resident going to the vascular annual meeting, asking every graduate what they were going to make for whatever signed contract, because I didn't know how else to garner that information, because it is a lot of hush hush, right? We're kind of cultured to say these are confidential discussions and we can't talk about it amongst ourselves. You know, and the benchmark information for the most part is proprietary. So unless you're going to pay a subscription to MGMA or other, it can be hard to get that information unless you actually just start talking amongst yourselves. So.
Abby, what about you?
I've always been interested in money. So I've always, you know, and I think that, you know, with, you know, if you're the sole earner for your family, which a lot of people are, or they're the higher earner for their family, yep, you have to know how that's going to affect your family and your career path down the road. So.
Abby?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So my journey started with Tahlia, showing this spreadsheet to us and kind of getting us motivated to think about the long-term trajectory of our career, which was, I think, very important, because when you're going through your training program, you're down in the weeds, you're thinking about the patient care. You don't really come up for air to think about the next steps until almost the end of your training. She kind of really forced us to start considering that early on. Like I was a second year when she first brought this up with me. And then what I noticed is when I was getting toward the end of my training, well, I had this general concept of what the trajectory should look like, but then the offers that I was receiving were not comparable to that. So I'm thinking to myself, well, this must be where I need assistance. I'm going to get a contract lawyer to look over my offers and look over my contracts and see where are the gaps, what am I missing, and how can I better approach negotiating myself into a better position. And honestly, I realized that I was at a disadvantage coming out of training because you tend to get more taken advantage of at that point in time in your career. But that doesn't mean that you can't get a better deal. And unfortunately, the the first set of people that I worked with, I didn't spend as much time vetting, and I ended up spending a lot of money on legal support to go through some of the minutia in the contract that were actually less critical details, um, and with regards to what I needed to get out of the arrangement. So I kind of had to learn that one the hard way when I first came out, and then landed myself in a job that I was very happy in, but with a deal that I was not very happy with. So I kind of took my time and decided to kind of educate myself a little bit throughout my time working in my first job, learning more about, well, how do I better myself in the next round? And I thought that was going to come into view when I was preparing to move into a partnership position in my practice. But what that all taught me was how to really identify a less than ideal deal and how to recognize that it's time to walk away and that you can make a good path for yourself without having to compromise what you know you're worth. And so I think that's kind of been a journey for me and learning to be okay, seeming like you're not the nicest person in the room, just because you're asking for what you want. And so I think a lot of it for me had to do with understanding the social aspect of the process of negotiation and not letting that keep me back from getting what I needed to get. So now I actually work very close with contract lawyers regularly, and I've kind of between their education and my self-education, oftentimes I'm bringing things to their attention that they would have otherwise missed as well. So it's, I think, been very rewarding, and I think has played a big role in my ability to own and run a practice myself now.
So it's not really just what you know, it's the delivery, right? I mean, maybe it's just how you deliver it. You just say very nicely, no, not okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, you know, in a little
I think when it comes down to contract negotiation, you really have to realize and understand that the only person that's looking out for you is you, right? So I mean, the not opposed, the person across the table, their goal is to get you in for the least amount. Right? So that's the game. That's the approach, right? Healthcare industry, healthcare systems, practice partnerships, they want to pay you the least amount they can to bring you in. That's the business. And unfortunately, right, we're not educated well on the business of medicine, but it is a high expectation of knowledge base once you're a practicing clinician. And, you know, as much as we should be educated about that throughout our process, there's just very little opportunities for, I think we're getting a lot better, you know, as an industry and in societies. But, you know, I don't think there's a lot of people that are going to want to jump into being a practice owner like Abby is, 6 years out of training, right? But there are some people that go into it right away.
Well, it
I
sounds
I will say that this concept is not just important when you're looking for your first job, your second job, your last job, but all of the time in between. We forget that we're actually constantly renegotiating our work and responsibilities and our pay and what value we're bringing and how they're compensating for that every step of the way. So it might be that you've been at your job for 10 years and you're not leaving, you're happy, but now they're asking you to fulfill additional roles. They're asking you to take on different clinical responsibilities, different administrative responsibilities. If you don't think about every one of those transitions as a new negotiation, you oftentimes will miss out an opportunity for yourself.
Even with industry relationships, right? So, many vascular surgeons are speakers and advocates for a different industry, but they pay in ranges too. So if you're not negotiating for a higher dollar amount per hour or per encounter, you're probably getting the least. You're probably on the lower part of the pay scale for that. So it's not just relevant for what your employee status is, it's really relevant for anything. Also, and Abby could tell you more, but if you own an outpatient-based lab, my disclaimer is I'm hospital employed, but if you own an outpatient-based lab, I see it from the administrative standpoint, we negotiate with all the vendors, right? So everything is a negotiation, and really having the confidence to be able to enter those types of discussions without feeling shame or fear, hesitation is really relevant. And I think that we can do better kind of educating people, but also counseling and coaching them to do it. The advocacy part of it is important as well. So,
I mean, it seems like y'all were both, or Abby, you were lucky because you had Tahlia to sort of mentor you through it at a very crucial time, so you could start thinking about it. And I know, fellows and chief residents will always approach me and say, hey, can you look at my contract? And it's brand new to them. It's language that, they've never heard of and no one's talked to them about for the last 5 years. Because you're right, like you're just concentrating on surviving your residency or your fellowship. And, two things we don't teach trainees at all about is coding billing. And if we do, it's one class or one little 90-minute session at the annual meeting and they totally forget. And, finances, like how to look at your contract, what are you worth? And I know for a fact, I regret starting off low, because if you start off low, that's your bar. You can go up, but you start off low. If you start off higher, then I would be at a higher salary now. So I'm trying to teach them ahead of time, but I think that is a really important point y'all both made. Like you took it to heart because you were a single mom, and then you shared your knowledge with all the residents that you were with. So,
and I think as healthcare, as clinicians, everyone's very smart, but we can be really money stupid. Really money stupid. I think that's just a base. We have big target, and that's kind of an industry known. We have big targets on our backs. Money stupid, right? So, and it's hard to go from somewhere where you're a trainee making, equivalent and sometimes even less than, our nurse colleagues are. And then you jump into a pay grade, and anything more than that seems like a windfall.
Amazing. Yes.
Right. But we have to be careful, and to be educated about it isn't that much more effort than all the effort that we put in to be vascular surgeons or other types of clinicians. So I think it's just acknowledging that we have a responsibility to be able to defend ourselves in a lot of ways, and not feel shame about discussing it is another thing. So I think that transparency in action is a key component of it. So I do have an education program that I do for my residents, and it's a 3-part, and the first one is coding and billing.
That's great.
The second one is finances and personal securities. Okay, where I make them sit down and do a budget and do the Excel sheet that I had shared with Abby. And the third one is contract negotiation. Because with those are kind of the 3 pillars of what can set you up for financial success. When you don't have a lot of knowledge base, unless you have a business major or you've done an MBA, but there's just not a lot of opportunity to educate yourself on these types of things. So
that is great. Yeah. Can you send me what you do for their budget? I might actually incorporate that into our lectures.
Yeah.
because
It's a
half of,
painful process, but
yeah,
most
I mean,
most
I
people in
think,
America need a budget.
yeah, I
It's
think
very
one of my
true. It's
residents,
extremely painful,
all of their money goes to Uber
highly
Eats.
valuable.
$600 worth of Starbucks every month.
Yeah, exactly.
And I will say that it goes both ways too. When you're looking at the dollar amount that's presented, you might get to a point where they're offering you a really good number and you understand it's a good number. But then you also have to be able to look through the details to see what you're getting for that number, what you're giving for that number. Because sometimes you can get taken advantage of that way as well. Like, what are the benefits? How transparent is their RVU process? How tangible, how changeable can they make those numbers? And do they have any responsibility to you to inform you or to confirm your contract as they change those numbers, which will completely affect what you're actually going to get compensated?
And those
Do they have
benchmarks change
transparency
every
about,
year.
right, every single year? Do they have transparency about the revenue cycle management? Do they have transparency about your direct and shared indirect expenses? Like that number might look amazing up front, but when you get down to the details, all those other aspects affects what that means to you.
Yeah. Are you incentivized to do outreach or are you disincentivized to do outreach?
Yeah.
Right. So, there can be windshield RVU attributions just for drive time. Okay.
Wow.
Otherwise, you're almost disincentivized to do outreach.
Right. 'Cause
Right.
why
So
would
you
you?
would otherwise start your clinic late, so you're kind of missing out on patient encounter time. Right. So you should at least have some sort of compensation model for the windshield time to incentivize you to actually do that practice. There's other models of that too, like even for procedures that don't have RVU attributions to them. Are you getting paid on the back end, right? Is there some kind of, or are you doing it all for free, right? Like many women, as you said, if we're getting paid, 10 to 15% less than our male colleagues, we're basically doing everything after September for free.
Yeah.
Oh, that is a great way of putting it, actually. Oh, that makes me so mad.
Doesn't it make you mad?
Well, oftentimes people will agree to go ahead and serve those roles because what we're thinking is it's going to pay off in the form of promotion or, I don't know, good favor as well, but that's not guaranteed. And they if we have not given you any form of writing that expresses that that's what it's going to lead to as well. I've known lots of other physicians that have fallen into that same game, and then they're still pedaling around trying to get that promotion that they thought they already earned by doing those extra tasks and playing those extra roles, but it still didn't end up paying off. So now you've just done free labor for what? Like every single thing that we do and every single bit of our time is valuable.
And I was even thinking, Linda, this is how in the weeds I get about this. I can send you the Excel spreadsheet, but what I'd rather is that you invite me to do a present of grand rounds.
Oh yeah. Okay. On every, yes, that would be I would be front row because I tell my residents all the time, like, you do not work for free. Do not work for free. So I mean, they kind of work for free now a little bit. I'm just kidding, but like, the time they
It's
spend.
because of CMS. That's not because of us.
Once residency's over, then don't work for free.
Yes, then don't work for free. Exactly. So, well, yeah, no, that would be wonderful. So I'll look at the grand rounds and talk to my chair, but I think, we don't put enough emphasis on this, and this is something they all need. They always tell me, I don't know where my money goes. I don't know where. I'm like, you actually make a lot compared to many other fields. Teacher versus teachers. And so where does your money? And they say, well, I think it goes to Uber Eats. Or, who knows what they spend their money on, but, and then they're here in the hospital all the time. So I know it's not like them spending it on, shopping
Exotic travel.
Right. Like yoga classes. They're doing, so yeah, but they have no idea. They have no financial savings. They think, oh, I'll just worry about all this when I'm done. And that's the problem. So
it is a problem. As someone that deferred their student loans for all 5 years of residency training, and it acquired more interest than I think the loan balance was, There are educated ways to approach finances, and then there's defer and don't worry about it. But the problem doesn't go away when you make more money. The problem just kind of, more money, more problems, right?
Right.
So
So
That's
how
the
did you
truth.
get the can you explain the advanced feminist coaching certification? Like how?
this was kind of something that I had done on a whim. I listened to Kara Lowenthal is a lifestyle coach, and she has a podcast called Unbleep Your Brain. And it's a feminist coaching podcast. I highly recommend it. But it talks about how, a lot of her teachings and coachings are about how we as women are cultured to literally think and behave a certain way. And until you actually break down the bias of your upbringing and your surroundings and your environment, it's actually really hard to balance corrective types of behaviors. So I had done it a little bit on a whim when I was the surgical services medical director, because although I think that my institution is very progressive, we have a lot of women surgeons. There's still a lot of just ingrained biases that are easily recognizable once you just start to look for them. And I think it's everywhere. It's not just at my institution. It really is everywhere. And so I wanted more resources and how to empower my fellow surgeons to speak out about it, and to be able to do it in a constructive way, and not in a way that they'll immediately be labeled as the dichotomous. You're either kill them with kindness or you're the operating room bleep, right?
Yeah.
And we all know that. We all have experienced that. So it's 2024, and it can still be a very typical way to triage women surgeons, right? And so she had this course offering, I did it, and then I had developed this project. We all had to have a final project to graduate with our certificate, and I focused mine on contract negotiation for women surgeons.
That's awesome. And I know you have some slides that you wanted to share.
Share them if someone. Do I have to reshare them, or will they become available?
You have to reshare them.
Okay. I'm going to try this, and I hope that this works.
Perfect.
All right. Tell me if you can see something.
Yes,
It looks
we
great.
can see it.
Yeah,
It's
perfect.
working.
Okay. Is it the full screen one?
Yes, perfect.
I was going to say 4 years since the pandemic, and I still don't know how to do Zoom meetings appropriately. Okay. So these are the introductory slides of my PowerPoint, and I'm not going to get into a lot of the coaching aspect of it, but a lot of this is just really data, and it's derived from the 2023 Doximity Physician Compensation Report. And if anyone hasn't read this, it's available online, it's public access. They have the updated 2024 Physician Compensation Report as well. And what was exciting about the 23 was that vascular surgery was finally on the leaderboard as the 5th highest paying specialty. Now, this was, their data is derived by survey, so it's not necessarily the benchmark data like MGMA, Sullivan Cotter. It's derived by physician feedback and survey. So always keep that in mind. But in general, for vascular surgery, that was looking very good. So annual compensation for vascular was $558 if we round up in 2023.
And you said this prior to the show that we were normally not this high on the list, correct?
Yeah, I don't think we were even on.
We weren't even on the
part
list.
of it is because our specialty is so small. So to garner a response rate high enough to actually publish some of the data. But we're growing as a specialty, and I think that as a specialty we do focus, and we do a good job at educating our cohorts on the importance of things like this: contract negotiation, midpoint salaries, all of the aspects of is it paid call, is it unpaid call, these types of things. So I think as a specialty we're doing a good job educating our cohorts for this, and that's shown. So the 2023 report actually focuses on the gender pay gap. So interestingly, even when salaries were controlled for specialty, location, and years of experience, women always made less. And the smallest pay gap was 3% for nuclear medicine. And then besides pediatric cardiology, which had a pay gap of 9.2, all other specialties had a gender pay gap of greater than 10%. So there were no medical specialties in the United States where women earned the same or more than men. Women physicians were reported more overwork and, perhaps an equivalence of higher burnout. And nearly 80% of women physicians surveyed reported they would consider, had already accepted, lower compensation for more autonomy or quote unquote work-life balance compared to 66% of male physicians. Okay, so my general question to the public is, why do women surgeons earn less when we often perform better? So there's relatively recent and old publications for evidence-based higher quality outcomes and patient satisfaction scores, including lower mortality. So even when matched, patients for surgeons to account for age and experience, patients of women surgeons were 4% less likely to die, be readmitted, or experience complications 30 days after their surgery compared to patients of male surgeons. So I always joke, but not joke, twice the work for half the pay. So how does this happen, right? So what is the premise of the pay gap, the gender pay gap, right? Is it that we're offered lower starting salaries thinking that we'll have a broader acceptance at lower? Do women accept lower offers without negotiation? So is there no negotiation involved? And are women more likely to accept pay decreases for better quote unquote work-life balance? So a lot of this is identifying and recognizing our factors of social conditioning. I do think that to a large population of women, we often tend to minimize and devalue ourselves. So not even from external, but we devalue ourselves. And we are perceived as greedy, overbearing, or even bitchy if we ask for more, right? And we often advocate very, very well for our peers and people that surround us, but often less so for ourselves. And do we say yes to compromise and to demonstrate our worth as a team player?
Do you think it's also, you're like in terms of RVU, just like the case mix? I mean, because traditionally, it's getting better, obviously, but, traditionally it was all men that were doing aortic work. And, these are higher RVU numbers, as we know. They're worth more. And then, women traditionally were always oh, you're doing veins, that kind of thing. So do you think?
I think identifying practice patterns and routes of discrimination is really important, right? And certainly women have been pigeonholed. I think Palma at Women's Vascular Summit, it was kind of displayed well or portrayed well that women are pigeonholed. They continue to be pigeonholed internationally, and some are never offered the opportunity to do aortic work, even when they're consultants. So identifying, practices of referral practices, but then also, if you find a discrepancy, what do you do about it?
Right.
You negotiate a fairer. And I would even say that if we tend, if there's evidence-based that we have better outcomes, why don't we get paid more? Why don't we get paid more?
I also wonder with regards to the aortic work, there are so many of us out here doing, the bread and butter stuff. And even in that realm, compared to our male colleagues, we're not getting the same volume of those referrals. They're preferentially been given to our male colleagues instead, which really makes no sense because our outcomes are excellent. So it's actually harder to build an aortic practice as a female because of the I guess, the referring providers also feeding into this discrepancy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
I
definitely
mean,
noticed that.
I think that there are still some institutions where, like, there's no negotiating in my institution. You don't like it, you leave. No one will try to retain you. That's the general pattern there. So you don't know that when you take the job, right? Unless you talk to other people. But you just have to know that if you're going to try to negotiate or get a raise, you're not getting one, so you could leave. And then you have to be willing to make that change and relocate your children or whatever. As women, we're not going to just pull our kids out of school. Maybe we're making more sacrifices. So that I think that becomes harder. And I think that a lot of the women are making decisions that are regarding not just themselves, but more like the family. And I think my bias may be that I think a lot of the men have a little lesser consideration of that and more about, getting what they want. And I think that their wives or their families acquiesce to their success. So I just don't think the field is even yet. I don't think
That's
that there's
getting
many
close to it.
men that want their wife to be super successful or even more than them. I mean, there may be some, a few, but that's not the majority. I think that's the minority. And I think that, many times, even when we finish training, I trained a while ago, but, the bottom line was you were always made to feel like you weren't as good as the men. Just as far back as when everybody was rounding and the male surgeon, they'd all go in through the men's locker room, and I'd be like, "Oh, where's the women's locker room?" And you were disconnected, just psychologically. You're really not part of us. You have to go through the other door. I mean, it's rooted so deep in our background that it is very hard to unpack all that and sort it when we're so busy, right?
And surgery is still a very paternalistic, specialty, I would say. Just the historic premise of it. It's a lot to try and unpack. And then as we were talking before the show, as much as we've done to successfully empower women, right, in recent years, we still haven't quite figured out the work to empower all the other groups to how to deal with and interact with empowered women. So, um, there's still a dichotomy, right, in how we're perceived, and how we're treated overall.
I think that it really hasn't only been till recently where society has started to address the concept of men serving more traditionally female obtained roles in the household. And so it's never had to be on their plate to consider those responsibilities. And so it's much easier for them to have been the provider and made the decision to make a move for their career, and the woman has followed along. Well, now we have a lot more professional women in the world, and we don't have as many like men who are experienced with being able to be that supportive role, that supportive character in the household. And so if they don't have any education and training on how to serve that role, they're very lost about what to do in these circumstances. And they're also having a hard time finding a way to be supportive of us in our goals that we're trying to achieve this way. So it's a multifactorial problem for sure. And it involves them just as much as it involves us, just in a different way.
And I think what's hard is I really believe there are some men like Alan Lumsden supports us. We run this show. This is like a 40-second show, imagine. And, Alan has supported us. We can just do whatever we want on whatever topic we want. And he's like, you go, and always supports us. So we love him for that. He's a huge supporter of women. And we always want to give a shout out to Alan. But I think there also are some men that pretend to be supportive of women, but they're really not. And I think those masqueraders are hard to it's hard to differentiate who's who in the mix. And then there's other men who they want to be supportive, but they're completely clueless about how to do that, right? Like you're just saying, like they want to, but they're afraid. Like they're afraid that they might misstep or do the wrong thing. So, but I think it's getting better. I mean, I feel like since #bikini, we've made a lot of progress. And, when I give talks about, my life, I always say, well, look what happened #bikini. And like we all, and I think we came out way ahead from that, to be truthful. I mean, it was like duck and cover for some people. But other people, we moved ahead. And the JBS never had so many female editors and reviewers, right? I mean, everybody had to step up and support the women. And, now we have the women's section for SVS, which is wonderful. And we have the International Society for Women Vascular Surgeons, which we are very involved in and we support. And I think, and not maybe each group isn't for everybody or every woman. I mean, we are all busy, obviously, doing different things. But what's important is that you find a place, a safe place where you can find other women. So now when I want to know more about like contract negotiation and coaching, I'm going to call Tahlia. I'm like, I'll tell you. You don't mind if I call you, right? Because, we hate to bother people. But I think that that's an important advancement, and I think we're making progress.
I think compensation is it can be a really intimate thing. And there's a weird, like, for as much as we get paid as surgeons, there's a strange fear of scarcity, right? So so there can be a reluctance to share, but I think that transparency is actually what elevates us as a specialty. As we were talking about pre-show, right? Whenever anyone in our specialty accepts a contract in the lower half of the range, right? The 5 to 95%, it actually brings us all down. For the benchmarks. So it's actually better for us to be transparent, to talk about it. You can ask, we talk about midpoints a lot, but you can ask for anything. And there's midpoint salaries, but there's also, the conversion factors come in the range. So the dollars per RVU comes in a range. And I think we can get complacent too. So if you get a cost of living bonus, right? Bonus every year. It's not really a bonus because it doesn't even catch up with inflation, right?
Right.
But
yes.
People will be like, oh, my salary is increasing every year. I'm good, right? So we can get kind of complacent. But the truth is that the midpoints and the dollars per are increasing every year. So if you're not renegotiating your salary really every year, you're really actually missing out. And it's not just cost of living, right? That's inflation. That's completely separate than what your contract is, what your value is as a vascular surgeon to an institution. So,
I'll never forget when I was in Boston and I was interviewing for a job in Houston. It was a while ago. Linda was still like training medical school or something. But anyway, and they made me you go through this meeting and interview, first visit, second visit, you spend all this buy-in to this thing. Now you're psychologically committed. And then they lowball you on the salary. And I said, this is lower than I make now. How could I possibly, I have so much to offer you. How could I possibly take this? Oh, yeah, but the cost of living is less. I was like, dude, the Starbucks coffee I bought in the airport was the same price as the one I paid for in Boston. So in simple terms, I just go based upon Starbucks. If it's the same price, then it's the same price. Yeah. You're not paying me enough money. So.
And we joke in certain institutions like, oh, that institution pays in sunshine, right? Because it's a sunny area. But yeah, I mean, I think it's we're a scant resource. Vascular surgeons are a scant resource. You can basically look at any state and there's openings for vascular surgeons anywhere. And if you don't have access to the benchmarks, one of the best things to do is just go out and interview. Even if you don't have intent of leaving your current institution, go out and interview, because that's actually the best, most updated fair market value, right, for your position in an area. And it's a time investment, but that's how you educate yourself. And I can say, my disclaimer, I've been at the same job for almost 8 years, but I interview every year at other jobs.
Well, we did a show with the SVS. Mike Dawson was on the show, and we had Verify. Randy Green, former partner of mine at Upstate, started that with another infectious disease doctor at Upstate called Verify, and they're collaborating with the SVS, and that's that survey that Keith Calligaro keeps talking about, that he wants everyone to fill out their thing so that we could hopefully, as a group, get on a better scale and have easy access to that knowledge that you're discussing. I don't know if you have an opinion. Have you filled out your survey for the Verify?
I fill out my survey. I look at it every year. I think sometimes it's hard to quantitate because different institutions quantitate different responsibilities. There's a large variance, right? So, and some people continue to do work for free. I would never advocate for that, right? So, but you should have and I'm on a productivity-based salary model. So I have a 0.6 administrative appointment, but my 0.4 is still production based, right? So, and the way that our institution designs that, it's gender neutral. I mean, and we reset salaries every year. So I was on the salary advisory committee for my institution for 4 years, and it's a lot of work to reset all of the physician salaries in your 9 hospital, however many clinics we have system. It's a lot of work, but we would reset it every year based on updated benchmark reporting. So I know a lot of institutions don't do that, but just having the knowledge that the benchmarks do change every year, and for the most part, for most specialties, they do go up, right? So if you haven't renegotiated your salary in 4 years, you may still be getting paid a certain amount of dollars per RVU that isn't relevant anymore. And if I could tell anyone anything, don't negotiate your midpoint, negotiate your dollars per RVU. So negotiate for a higher dollars per RVU, because that makes the work that we do more valuable. Mm-hmm. And CMS is doing what CMS does. It's cutting the RVUs for every procedure every year, mm-hmm. right? But, so you don't want to have to do more work in the future for the same amount of money.
But what if it's based on, how do you argue when it's based on what you collect? Because
collections are hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, collections are hard. That can be some of the most difficult, especially if you're, if you have a broad payer mix, mm-hmm. right? Or if a lot of your patients don't have insurance coverage. So, collections-based reimbursement is just a very, very difficult model. But that's the most financially responsible model for most institutions to have. Right? That's the true, you pay what you treat.
No RVU. I said I'm all collections based, no RVUs. Yeah. And yes, it can be quite complicated up front, but I think the payoff is far greater because even as those dynamic changes happen through the payer model, you can ensure some level of consistency of value that you're getting for what your work that you're contributing. So I think that honestly, the RVU model now I feel it's kind of a sham, a way for our work to be devalued. I really don't understand why so many of us have agreed to stay in that kind of model. But it's been used notoriously as a tool to take advantage of us. So if you're collections based, you actually have way more control about the type of work you do, what your revenue is going to be, and you actually know how to monitor your revenue cycle, which is everything about your job and mm-hmm. about your compensation. So yeah, I think that's I don't know, a better model in my mind.
Collections based is the most transparent
yes.
payment structure, right? But to that end too, you negotiate everything, right? So you negotiate payments from your payers, you negotiate, right? You have to pay your staff, you have to pay your overhead, but it is the most transparent because at least you have a steady stream of income, right? To actually justify what you're paying out for it. So it's the most fiscally responsible. And I think fiscal responsibility in healthcare is not often said together in the same sentence. But RVU models can falsely incentivize people to do procedures, right?
Exactly.
And that's the thing. And money is a very intimate thing. I'm not going to call anyone out. I can say with confidence I'm a RVU productive surgeon. I have not done any atherectomy in 7+ years. But I think that, and I'm still a highly productive surgeon, but I'm also just very efficient. I'm efficient with my time. So that allows me to do a lot in a day compared to other people. So, but it can, I don't like RVU based models, right? Because I second guess myself a lot. I'm like, what am I doing this for? Am I doing this for the patient, right?
I think it's harder to do that when you're a single mom with a child, right? Mm-hmm. I have my little own Excel spreadsheet too, which goes, year to year. And I could tell you last year what I paid for December's utility bill, right? And how much I need to anticipate I will need to, to use my salary for and how much I might have left over, but I've always felt more comfortable knowing, and maybe I'm getting underpaid, but I know I'm always getting this minimum amount. And I always felt more comfortable that way than worrying that I will maybe fall below what I need to pay my mortgage this month. So I think if you have a second earner in the family, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just looking at it from my perspective, but I think you feel a little more secure that there's a second income. And if you dip a little bit lower, you'll be okay.
I think it's very highly stressful to be the single earner for a family. I think regardless of what the familial makeup is, but that's definitely what propelled me into thinking about my finances with a fine-tooth comb. So and I had spreadsheets for everything, for each state, what the state income taxes were, what the cost of education was going to be, the cost of transporting, right, nanny costs, right, private school versus public school. But I mean, I had to know that for a sense of security because there was no one else I could rely on to provide for myself and my son. So no, I definitely identify with that, Palma.
So we have 10 minutes left. So in wrapping this up, what advice would you give to the graduating fellows out there on how to do this? Or really anybody, like me, because now I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I need to look at my RVU, but
wait a minute. Yeah, I got to look at something.
Yes,
it's never too early to educate yourself on finances, and I think there's so many readily available resources now that are vetted, right? So I love boggleheads. So if you're one of the kind of people you're like, I don't even know what a 401k is, like just educate yourself on what a 401k is, right? And the benefits of a 401k. If you don't know what an RVU is, okay, call me. But educate yourself. Educate yourself on what conversion factors mean, because these are a lot of things, or reimbursement models, because there's everything out there and available and everything in between. So these are types of things. So it's not just when you're looking for a job, you're looking at your, what we're taught, look for a good senior partnership that's going to back you up, support your decision making, collaborate with you, have a good case mix. If you don't know how you're going to be paid, you're kind of stuck in the mud, right? You just have to educate yourself on it. And you don't have to get an MBA about it because everyone's smart enough to understand. Everyone is absolutely smart enough to understand. But you have to arm yourself so that you're not taken advantage of.
Do you suggest a contract negotiator? I feel like you were saying you worked with a bunch in the beginning.
Yeah. So, I mean, the argument that I would make for and against it is one of the issues is you kind of need to know what you don't know and educate yourself, like Tahlia said, but also realize that there are limitations to what you can do, that other people have literally spent a good part of their lifetime becoming an expert in. So, and I feel like that plays a role every single day in my practice, is learning where you need that support and how to get it and what resources to go to is a really big deal. So maybe you do use a contract negotiator. Well, when you're using that contract negotiator, have them actually explain to you the details of what they're negotiating and why. And I feel like sometimes they kind of give you a generic answer and they will spend their time doing the back and forth with the other team's lawyer. It is far more valuable to you to sit down with them for an hour and let them educate you on what they know than any of that will be.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
And
great advice.
What other thing I would say is fight for transparency. Fight for transparency. It's to your benefit. It's to the benefit of your division. It's to the benefit of our entire field for you to have transparency in what you're being offered, your job, your requirements, and share that. Don't be afraid to share it. It's not going to make you look bad. It's not going to make you look better or worse than anybody. It's only going to be uplifting for us all. It's just worth it. So have transparency, know every single thing that's in your contract and what's not there. It's critical.
That's great advice.
Everything in the end either costs time or money, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to part with one or the other. Try not to do both.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for a fabulous show. And now I feel like I need to read more on this.
But we're not done this conversation, right? Because
Yeah, this is just the start of
ladies
it.
are part of the Inner Society for Women Vascular Surgeons.
Yeah.
And we have other ways to unite and educate each other and connect either in person or virtually. And many people will watch this webinar even after tonight. They'll watch it all over the world. People in Bucharest are going to watch this webinar. People I know.
I think it was in the 2024 Doximity Physician Compensation Report where it says, like, there's a large proportion of male physicians that still don't believe there's a gender pay gap.
They choose to be in the dark.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is being, in order to move the needle, we've got to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. And we've got to be very vocal about it. Why don't we get paid more? I mean, I'm probably going to get a lot of feedback on X about that. But honestly, if our outcomes, are better with less mortality, but there's also higher fiscal responsibility in women surgeons. So we're actually costing institutions less.
Yep.
Utilize less materials, our hospital length of stay are less, right? Why don't we get paid more?
Mm-hmm.
And these are conversations we have to have with our male colleagues.
Mhm.
Like, it's so important. One of the issues that comes up is as we're asking these questions, people get very defensive because now you're accusing them of actively deciding to have a discrepancy in what they're offering based on your gender. And no one's going to willingly admit
Right.
or assume and think of themselves that they are somebody who acts that way or is contributing to the problem. This is a systematic issue. It's not a one person issue. It's not a targeted, you're a bad person, I'm a good person issue. If we don't all come together and recognize that every single one of us are playing a role in why this gap exists, then we can't actually move forward to improve it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Great.
really interesting. In the Doximity report too, it said that women tend to accept less pay for a lower FTE, right? But in many instances, and many of the people that I've talked to, they're still taking a full FTE of call and not getting paid for it, right? And work-life balance to me is a mythical creature. It actually doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So oftentimes you reduce your FTE, but you often are the most available surgeon to the group. So the staff are constantly badgering you, right? Coming to you to fix all these issues. You're still working 60 hours a week. So where's your work-life balance, right? It's because we are accommodating, we're collaborative, right? We want to do what's best for our patients. Every surgeon does. But for a lot of reasons, people presume that women are more accessible, less likely to, right, snap at you for disrupting you, right, while you're in the middle of reading vascular studies. So, for me, when people say, oh, I've reduced my FTE for better work-life balance, I'm like, I usually say, so you've offered to work more for free.
Yep.
So you've reduced your retirement contributions, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know to ask for a reduced call burden. And it perpetuates the cycle in a lot of ways.
Such a
Well,
good
the
point.
time is getting to 6, and this is where we should do a remix of this at some point.
Yeah.
But thank you so
Part
much
two.
for being here and for spending time with us for free, because we're not. But I feel like this is for the
we
greater
do this for
good.
free.
It's enrichment money.
Yes.
Because
But,
I love
we have a
seeing you
good
guys'
time.
faces.
Yeah.
We enjoy this. So
Yes.
we
So-
get to know people better this way. We
Yeah.
enjoy it.
All right. Well,
Absolutely. Thank you
y'all
for
have a
having
good
us.
night.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Hope to see you soon.